Okay, and I believe we are live. Running a little behind this morning, guys. Sorry about that. I just wasn't paying attention to the time while I was putting that thumbnail together. But yo, here we are. All right, and good morning. So, I'm just going to jump right into it this morning. There was good old Donald Trump at one of his rallies recently. I'm sure many of you have seen this, but I want to talk about it in depth because this might be his next 14th Amendment moment. I'll explain that. But at one of his rallies recently, Donald Trump said that he wants to abolish the federal income tax and replace it with tariffs. So, of course, you got a lot of people just screaming that this is a terrible idea. Not least of which, of course, are people like Janie Yellen. She said, Yellen on Trump's tariffs, taxes idea, it would make life unaffordable. No. No. You see, there is a base presupposition, a snuck premise that is required to be accepted before one can make the argument that the tariff model would make life unaffordable in America, and it's this. It's the assumption that the government needs to be the size that it is. The only way that it's a problem is if in the course of eliminating the income tax and replacing it with tariffs and the like, you don't also shrink the federal budget, shrink the expenditure of the government, the vast majority of which is entitlement programs. We only just recently, as many of you know, we're $1 trillion range on national debt. And like a lot of us were screaming to the heavens about the psychopathy of Obama's march from sub 10 trillion to, Obama tripled the debt. Obama tripled the national debt. Now, while Trump was in office, the national debt also increased. You'll notice I didn't say Trump increased the national debt. And in fairness, Trump spent a bit more than I would have liked him to, generally. However, the debt increased only slightly more than the cost of neglected service, which is to say that we're at a point that we are spending more on servicing the interest of the national debt than on the principal of the national debt, right? And when you're talking in the tens of trillions of dollars, I don't care what your GDP is, we're not talking about a 30-year mortgage situation where you're paying interest for the first third of it and then you're really attacking the principal unless you're prepaying and doing the right thing there. So let's talk taxes generally. Um, the governments, and that is to say the federal government, state governments, county, municipals, towns, uh, the several governments that are in the stack of authoritarian drivel that stands on your shoulders and sucks at your teats. You know, I've got nipples, Greg. Can you milk me? Well, apparently, if you're the fucking government, you can. Um, you are charged an income tax to earn money. And that's a quarter to a third of your income right there. Gone. Gone. And then you're taxed, you're charged a sales tax to spend the money that you've already been taxed on. Property taxes, additional taxes on specialty items, and specialty items, we're not just talking your gold-plated Zippo lighters for your good Cuban cigars. I don't know, you know, I mean, vice tax, yeah, that's a pain in the ass. You know, right now a pack of cigarettes costs you about $10, and about 7.5 of those are tax. A pack of cigarettes still costs between $2.50 and $3. Not that I care anymore since I quit fucking smoking 2 weeks ago. but let's be real, cigarettes are ridiculously expensive. Right? Fuel tax on gasoline. You pay a tax on the gas and you pay a sales tax on the purchase of the fuel. And it's even worse than that, you see, because before you even pay that sales tax on a product, the corporation that produced the product, the company that produced the product, paid taxes on the labor to produce the product. They paid taxes on the material that they had to purchase to construct the product. They pay taxes on the transportation costs. And guess where those taxes go, right? Never forget this. You cannot tax a corporation. It's not possible. You can only tax an end user. And this isn't because the corporation does some nefarious trick to use loopholes to pass the cost of the tax on to the end user, onto the consumer. No. It is metaphysically impossible for anyone but the end user to pay the tax, because the tax is necessarily not. I'm not saying taxes are necessary. I'm saying that while tax is extant, which it is, metaphysically, it is by transitive property impossible for that not to be a tabulation in the calculation of the cost of the product to the end user. So you pay the corporate tax, which is necessarily built into the cost of the product, and then you pay the sales tax on the product that you're purchasing. More than half of the money that you earn is consumed by taxes. Now that's assuming you're a taxpayer. Let's be fair. Let's be fair, and this is one of the reasons I like Trump talking about abolishing the income tax. Less than half of Americans, about 43% of Americans, actually pay any taxes at all. Of that 43% that do pay taxes, right? Now, okay, in fairness, everybody pays taxes because they pay sales taxes, right? But let's talk about the income tax for a minute because that's what we're talking about abolishing. Less than half of Americans pay an income tax. The vast not the vast majority, but the majority, more than half, either get everything back or are on the welfare dole. And a lot of that lower half are both. A lot of them on the lower half are both. Then of the 43%, give or take it, that number fluctuates from year to year, but it's between 43 and 47%. But of the less than half that do pay taxes, the majority of them pay very little in taxes. And the top about 5% of those, the top 5% of income earners in the U.S. So that's including the non-payers. So about the top 5% of all earning, they pay around 90% of all the taxes. When you hear the Democrats talking about taxing the rich, right? I won't lie. There's a romance to that. I can see how a young and untrained mind might find that attractive. But the fact is, they're already paying for everything. Essentially everything. And I want you to look around your world. Go outside, take a walk down the street, go for a drive. What are you getting for that money? What are you getting for that money? One of the favorite arguments of the bootlicking statist is, well, without taxes, who's going to build roads? You know, before the passage of the income tax, all of the railroads were private enterprise. And in many of those cases, it wasn't that a rich man did a thing. It was that a man got rich doing a thing. The railroads were built by private industry. Many of the early roads were built by private industry. In fact, the government didn't even really get into the road building business until the introduction of military aircraft. So, at which point there was a need, right? We're talking Eisenhower. There was a need for long, straight stretches of essentially emergency runway, which was one of the primary reasons that the interstate system was introduced to begin with, was to have basically emergency runways all over the place for military aircraft. And hey, I ain't knocking that. I'm not. I would. Sergeant Major points out we only have 3 train wrecks per week with the government supervising them. Yeah, no shit. So yeah, remember what was it? It's been about 2 years now, I guess, since the East Palestine train derailment chemical spill tragedy. Since I mentioned trains and Dad said something about trains, yeah, I don't know if y'all remember this or not, but it was like all of a sudden America learned that trains still existed. Like apparently there were, people living in larger cities just didn't even realize that trains were still a thing. And I'm like, really? How you as a grown ass man, you ain't never had to get out your pickup truck and pee on the side of the road because you were stuck at a railroad crossing waiting to get to the other side? Come on now. Oh, St. Michael says he lived a few hours away from that when it happened. Could you smell it, brother? Because, yeah, I bet that was rough. Anyway, so Trump's proposal is that we get rid of the income tax, and kind of like I just mentioned, you know, people didn't realize trains were a thing anymore. You know, we've been doing it a certain way for so long that people don't understand that there was a way before that. So the American federal government, the federal income tax, was enacted in 1913, right? This was the 16th Amendment. Is that right? Yeah, 16th Amendment. It was before suffrage and prohibition, but just barely. So 16th Amendment gave us the income tax, created the IRS, and without even going down the long conversation about how the existence of the IRS is unconstitutional on the very face of it. No, let me touch that for a minute. Okay, so the 16th Amendment created the authorization for the existence of the IRS. However, the IRS, in order to accomplish its mission, requires that you open your books to the IRS, requires that you self-report private information to a government entity. The 16th Amendment did not, even within its own text or argument, repeal or foreclose the Fourth and Fifth Amendment. So the Fourth Amendment says that you are to be secure in your person, property, and papers, and that security shall not be violated without a warrant issued on due cause. Then you've got the Fifth Amendment that protects you from self-incrimination. That was weird. Okay, that was weird. My shirt just kind of like, I don't know if I pulled it against something, but the sleeve of my shirt kind of pulled, and it felt like somebody had set their hand on my shoulder. We about to have a moment. There's about to have a moment. Anyway, yeah, my wife's at work and my kids are at my folks' house on the farm, playing in the pool and I'm out here all by myself in the middle of the woods, and I've had a couple of moments because I haven't shot anybody in like 14 years, 12 years. So the introduction of the income tax created an entity, the IRS, whose existence is unconstitutional on the face of it. Not unlike the ATF, right? Every single member of the ATF belongs in prison. And that's not my opinion. That is the law under Section 242. Same thing with the IRS. Every single member of the IRS, under the law, is a criminal. Is a felon in violation of federal law. Suppression of liberty under color of government, under color of authority. Or I'm sorry, suppression of civil liberties under color of law. That's it. So, prior to the creation of the IRS, the federal income tax, taxes were government revenue was supposed to be a function of tariff. The only reason one can argue that the revenue collected by government through tariff would be insufficient to run the government is to operate on the presupposition that the government must continue to exist at its current obovated gargantuan size. And it not only is that not necessary, but clearly, as evidenced by the rapid inflation of the national debt and, well, inflation, it cannot continue to operate at its current size. It's just not tenable. So I believe, we're already relatively certain that the Donald is going to take the White House in November, right? Failing another 2020 shadow campaign, straight up theft, and y'all, if they stop counting in the middle of the night, if they stop counting in the middle of the night again, that's it. We shouldn't care what the outcome is. If they stop counting in the middle of the night, that is the moment where you assume Joe Biden is stealing the election. Lock him up. As soon as the count stops in November this year, that's it. That's it. The election's over. Donald Trump is now the presumed president, and the investigation into the Democrat scam machine begins. Right there. That's what should have happened in 2020. As soon as the election went irregular, should have been the end of the conversation. But I digress. I think this tax plan. I'm not holding my breath. And frankly, we didn't quite get what we wanted out of Donald Trump his first term, vis-a-vis the 14th Amendment claim. But when he made the statements about the 14th Amendment, which says that any person who is born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof is a citizen, right? 14th Amendment, that's pretty clear language. If you're born in the United States to criminal, hostile foreign invaders who are subject to the jurisdiction of a hostile foreign nation, or any foreign nation, but in most cases a hostile one, then you are not a citizen because your parents are not citizens, right? There is no birthright citizenship in the United States. The 14th Amendment is quite clear on that. But the courts, it's not even that the courts treat it incorrectly. The real problem with the 14th Amendment and the question of birthright citizenship and anchor babies is that the courts refuse to deal with it. That's the problem. So when Trump talked about that, I knew that he had that election. I knew that he was going to win 2016. That was on lock when he started talking about the 14th Amendment. I knew this is going to speak to Americans at a certain level that just cannot be ignored. I think this abolished the federal income tax language, because let's be real. What we also, it's reasonable. It's reasonable to hear this and say, I don't think it's going to happen. The Democrats and Republicans will fight too hard to hold on to the federal income tax. And that's a tragedy. That's disgusting. And we should hate them all for that. But Donald Trump's talking about taxes. And the last time Donald Trump was talking about taxes, he did things with taxes that made the economy explode in the right way. Right? The last time Donald Trump said, I'm going to do something good with taxes, he doubled the child income tax credit. Right? He gave Americans a tax break. And the economy responded overnight. It was explosive. And that will happen again. Now, unfortunately, assuming he wins in November, which I am, that will not happen until 2026. Right? It'll be enacted in 2025, and then it'll actually take effect in 2026. And by that time, we'll already be talking about who's going to be replacing him. And that is the tragedy of a Donald Trump win in November, is we only get him for one more term. And hey, don't get me wrong. If y'all want to get together and sign a petition to repeal the 22nd Amendment, I think is the one that gave us, it's either the 20th or the 22nd. 21st repeal prohibition. Either the 20th or the 22nd that created the 2-term limit. Hey, I'll take it. But I think I'm going to go ahead and put a pin in it there, because the rest of this conversation is going to start veering into. Alex is asking about. I did see the DJI drone ban pass the House. I've got mixed feelings about that. The word from DJI is that if you already own one of their drones, Alex, that it'll still work. It'll continue to work. They're just, you won't be able to get the newer drones they're making. And so I'll still be using my 3 DJI birds indefinitely. But I will be following that, and I might do a show about that in the next in the not too distant. I want to see a little more news about how the U.S. domestic market on drone production is looking to take advantage of that. There are a couple of U.S. So okay, here's what's going on. I'll throw you all a little inside baseball on the drone world for a second. Alex says the FCC are implying that even existing drones will be blocked from the spectrum. That'll be interesting. We'll see what happens there. Now, frankly, at the moment, I'm not personally overly concerned about it, because I'm not doing professionally, I'm not doing any drone stuff anymore right now. But it will aggravate the shit out of me if suddenly, I got $6,000 or $7,000 worth of drones sitting here that are just dead in the water because the FCC. But DJI is the absolute best drones in the world. They make the best drones you can put your hands on, at every level. But of course, they're a Chinese company. And there are, on the one hand, there are concerns about the involvement of the Chinese Communist Party in the company and what access they have to the data infrastructure of the drones themselves. But to be fair, there have been several American domestic drone manufacturers, which I hate to admit, because what I would absolutely cut a motherfucker over is to be able to put my hands, even at a premium cost, on an American-made drone of a quality equal to a DJI drone. But there are several American domestic manufacturers of drones that have been lobbying for the banning of the DJI drones, and they've been making the national security arguments, et cetera, et cetera. And don't get me wrong, I don't mean to undercut the national security argument. There is a legitimate national security threat where the use of those drones crosses over governmental concerns. Now, for somebody like me, I'm not hunting terrorists with drones anymore. As much as I'd love to be, as much as I miss doing that, when I'm flying drones now, I'm shooting cinema, I'm shooting weddings, I'm shooting real estate marketing material. You know, that's what I use drones for now. I'm just not in the killing bad guys business anymore. Mostly because I'm old, kind of fat. But that's kind of the summary on that one. And as we see more and more develop on how the U.S. domestic drone market is going to respond to this, let's be real, very attractive and potentially very lucrative opportunity. I'll be studying up and reading on that, and we'll end up doing a show to talk about that as well. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. I'm going to put a pin in it right there. Thanks for watching today. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.